For those of you just joining me to hear me yap about the 100 line Last Defense Academy video game, hi, hello, I've talked about 6 other games in 2 other videos to get here. You should watch those, or if you'd rather not, that's also fine. This is the third part of a trilogy, after all, the beginning of the end, dialectics or some shit, the dead speak. So, the whole plan was always to weigh this game against its spiritual predecessors, Kodaka's Danganronpa, Uchikoshi's Zero Escape, and the culminating effect of powering through all 100 endings of this game in short order has left me very lost. And I'm not alone. A lot of the critical reception of this game outright just didn't finish it, or if it did, kind of glossed over the bulk of it. I don't know. But there's so much more going on in this game. Its first impression is triumphant, a big, beautiful-looking case of Kodaka and Uchikoshi having their extremely mean-spirited fun. If you're hoping for some kind of miraculous shifting of Kodaka's principles as a character writer, this game will not give you that. It is a revelation of filth obvious and apparent from the moment Doremi mugs for the camera for the first time. Filth ongoing as characters get freakier, reveal deep fetishes, both of their own and the writers, escalated to parodic extreme when the gooner comedy duo Kurata and Kyoshika join the scene. There is every sensible-minded person's reason to take one look at this, maybe half-heartedly marvel at the sheer scope of it all, and then try and put some distance between them, probably to either play a real game like Silksong, or wait for your more conservative Gooner bait title, like the new Fire Emblem that's coming out. But I've never been a sensible person intentionally, and I would much rather be out here advocating for this bizarre masterpiece. 100 line is good, shockingly good in ways I'm scarcely ready to write about. I'm trying to wrap my head around the totality of it all still. It's taken me months to chip away at it. This is the first video that's going to take advantage of my new Patreon situation where I don't have to release a new video every month. I've taken extra time just for you, just for 100 line. Isn't that a nightmare? Let's discuss.
Up and Adam troops, time to rise and shine!
Right out the bat, the game is putting itself in sheer opposition to the predecessor titles I've somewhat arbitrarily decided to be this video's counterpoints. See, the premise of Danganronpa and most of Zero Escape is built on an assumption of normalcy. Makoto, Hajime, Kaede, Junpei, and Sigma are regular youths in regular life who are pulled into bizarre hostage situations that unfold more and more as you progress through them. Learning that you're part of a televised murder show, or that you've mind-jumped 50 years into the future and are on a moon base, are these big, weighty reveals that pull the curtain back on your assumption of this normalcy. Takumi has no such luxury. The game opens with him and his childhood friend Karuha hanging out in what at first seems to be Tokyo, but rapidly reveals itself to be some kind of underground shelter complex, one that has regularly scheduled emergency raids, and in this case gets assailed by strange monsters called, bizarrely, school invaders. Takumi is then accosted by this egg ghost motherfucker, Sire, given a special knife and told to stab himself in the heart with it to save his Discord kitten. There is maybe some high-concept artistic symbolism happening here. The game has already departed from a normal world from word go. You are in a place that itself seems to be something of a wild mystery, but smartly, this is also just close enough to being a regular setting that it remains a captivating motivator. Whatever deep lore shit is going on behind the scenes here can't pull you away from the obvious main goal. Takumi's gotta get home and get back to his technically not girlfriend. I think that in any game that has this kind of setup, you know, games with a very clearly telegraphed goal that seems simple, the best ones can really readily set in the feeling that these are going to be, for example, 100 of the worst days of the main character's life. From literally day 1, moments after being introduced to your 9 classmates, you can't even manage to convince half of them to pick up a weapon and fight for the school. Within the next couple days, Sire goes missing right before confessing why everyone was brought here, and then you have to deal with having no information, no idea how far away from society you are, no idea what you're protecting, no idea what these invaders are, and why you're here, and now you have to bicker tooth and nail to get the rest of your classmates fighting, a conflict made even more frustrating when you're knocked out and left outside the wall of flame protecting the school, miraculously picked up by the much more on board with things students from the second to last Defense Academy, only for them to pick fights with the team members refusing to fight. Every step of the way feels like you're somehow unknowingly making the wrong decision, the plan feeling like it's slipping away and you can't truly grasp it. The game, maybe in a subtle nod to its reputation as that game with 100 endings, leaves you in the dark so much that it may even be easy enough to feel like there is no clear way of knowing if you're already on a path or something, if you're being judged in some unseen way and have already found a fail state. And absent that clarity, you're left bickering in the dark with 14 of Kodaka's Blorbos. Great. If we were to read the events of this game in the lens of Kodaka's most popular series, Danganronpa, I think it's easy to see a lot of maturity and growth on display. Now, I should be clear, he hasn't made a cast of profound, grounded, nuanced characters. Kodaka's character filth runs deep. From the get-go, I've been telling friends about this game broadly as a game where, quote, 15 of the worst people you know are forced to fight for their lives for 100 days. This remains kind of true, but the major point of change is that, contrary to Danganronpa, he can't really make characters the same way. Take, for example, because I'm nice, Peko Pekoyama from Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. She's a pretty strong personality early on, and then kills someone, and then dies. The length of her arc really only has to stretch to the end of Chapter 2, and everything else you could learn about her through your bond levels can be interesting, sure, but it is also not exactly relevant to the story. Backfill to show more that these characters all have the potential for richer stories, both as a cover to hide the murder mystery aspect, and also to add to the drama of it all. The interesting things going on with Peko will remain forever a mystery, until you decide to watch the 2.5 anime, or until she becomes the main character of Danganronpa 2x2. God, please let it happen, please. In contrast, Darumi is your larger-than-life, cringe, meme-lord girl failure of the 100-line cast. She dies in the first battle, but then comes back to tutorialize that your party is pseudo-invincible. You don't need to be afraid of losing units in combat. We just scoop them and all of their blood up in this box, and then they get revived and brought back next wave. This both means that the times characters do die in the story, it's all the more interesting and complex a puzzle, and that now Darumi can't just be a wacky meme character that gets murked immediately. No, she makes it all the way to day 100, along with 2/3 of the party, a massive cast for a Kodaka title to be sure. In fact, most characters make it to the final stretch, with only Hiroko and Moko and Ima's regular body, I guess, being the early casualties. And Sire and Nigo, but this isn't about them. It is funny that they kill the Monokuma of the game, but this isn't about them. No. Early on, the game feels like a weird writing exercise for him, really making you have to sit with every bizarre character, run a persuasion minigame that starts off ridiculous with Tsubasa and Gaku, and going to a bizarre extreme where you're made to try and convince Kako to not fight, only for her and her brother to both join in instead. Character conflicts that would have ended with macabre flourish are instead slowly worked out. Big, bombastic reveals like Kurata's hidden self, for lack of better phrasing, or Nozomi's unfolding multiple dramatic reveals, Shoma's bizarrely specific, inexplicable dreams about the hospital, things that are now lived in. Like everything is the Genocide Jack reveal from Danganronpa 1, but it just keeps happening to the rest of the cast in lieu of people dying. That is, of course, until people do start dying. The final stretch goes haywire, and appropriately so. Right at the finish line, the final commander appears, traps everyone but Nozomi and Takumi, who fight for their life to free the others, only for the commander to kill Ima, and then finally Nozomi. And after all of these strange puzzle pieces, that she looks like Karuha, that she has no memory of you, that she has a different origin story, after weeks of in-game time slowly convincing himself that despite it being seemingly impossible, Nozomi must just be a different person. Her death reveals that she somehow is Karuha. In the last minute flash of apparent sense memory, Nozomi remembers, quote, that boy, Taki. The game could have stopped there, of course. You know, the hero's childhood friend killed in front of him would render any victory at this point hollow. But the final twist of the knife is the reveal that since the beginning, Eito has been destabilizing everyone. He killed Sirei, he orchestrated the group's downfall, all coming from a seething, pathological hatred of humanity. He kills the magic fire baby, a rad song plays. Can we play that song? You kill Eito, but the plan has fully failed. There is nothing to do but just board the escape pod and go back home. Hey, by the way, did you forget about Uchikoshi? At the very end, it's revealed that in taking Eito's baby-infused blood, Takumi's in-game ability to retry battles is both diegetic and has been supercharged, to the point that he can now go back and redo the entire 100 days again. He chooses not to board the escape pod with the others, instead vanishing from the timeline as he goes ahead and signs himself to the Nightmare Zone. Here, at long last, Uchikoshi kicks in, because all of that was the prologue. The real 100 line starts here. I always wanted to say something big and dramatic like that in one of these vids, but like, that's kind of not even true. It's more like a sequel built into the game. Like they literally call this half of the game 100 Line 2. It's cute. Anyway, welcome to hell. Trying to recount the first thoughts around the second playthrough feels difficult. Like, if anyone was paying attention to memes on Blue Sky back around when the game came out, there's this one account, Gozu, who became like a significant 100-line paratext through his efforts to respond to the game without giving real spoilers to it. The effect was genuinely captivating. I remember wondering with worry just what on earth kind of paths he wound up on if I were to also find the Nightmare Factory paths that immediately. It's genuinely a fantastic romp of a thread to go down if you're curious. I'll link it below. Ultimately, though, his posting through it really became the major draw to the game. I had to know. You know, he was going through it. Some of my friends also playing the game were going through it. It was this captivating situation where everyone knew they had some of the puzzle pieces, but no one was confident enough to really meaningfully talk to each other out of fear that in doing so we would spoil things. At the start of this venture, everyone was in high spirits, inspired by each other, by Gozu saying some downright irresponsible things, by reviews going on about how scared they were by it, and one particular cat was curious about just how expansive, just how many different possibilities were ahead of them. Now, in reality, in a lot of ways, 100 Line plays its genre very true to form. You know that surviving to day 100 is the name of the game, ideally with everyone alive, and that is going to be wildly difficult to pull off, and it is. So in a lot of ways, playing Zero Escape and Danganronpa very much helped me to prepare for this. I knew that I was looking at like 99 failed endings and one golden route because this is an Uchikoshi project as much as it is a Kodaka one, and in getting to that golden route, you will necessarily have to traverse the depths of hell. How much depths? Well, shelving the second scenario and the steady fundamental routes for later leaves us with the reset, goodbye Eito, rebellion, Ava, multiple Eitos, serial battles, conspiracy, casual, box of blessings and calamity, cult of Takumi, Veshness, coming of age, Retsnam, romance, slasher, comedy, killing game, and mystery routes. 22 storylines in total to use their specific way of labeling things. I would personally compress that down a bit because Reset, the two Eito routes, the serial battles, and conspiracy routes are all kind of offshoots of the second scenario, with really only the Rebellion and Ava roots from that setup significantly different enough, in my opinion, that they warrant a full-on separate narrative titling, but whatever. The totality of this project keeps hitting me. I'm honestly glad I've taken this time to really work on this. One bit of advice: if you're keeping yourself to an extremely strict video schedule, you run a real risk to the quality of the work you do. Not to say that this video is good per se, especially now that I'm pausing in the middle of it to advocate for taking more time with things, especially as it's the first time in like 5-ish years I've taken this advice. But like seriously, if you know any essayist out there uploading a new video every week, that's not a great sign. What was I talking about? Danganronpa. No, 100 line. For context, the first ending I got was ending 66, because I wanted to brag to my friend and Danganronpa rival Professor Bopper that I got to kiss Hideko before him, leading to Takumi and Hideko both falling off the roof and dying and reviving, and now we're just in a completely low-stakes route that's just on which of 4 girls Takumi has romantic feelings for, if any of them. At this point, I could have gone back and picked the more serious split into Steady Fundamental, but I took this as a sign that ultimately a fundamental part of playing this game is to accept that you are very much not in control of the wild 22 theme park rides you're about to embark on. Part of this journey would have to be accepting that in seeing all 100 endings. I may just want to save the ones I suspect I will like the most for last. This failed in 2 completely different directions, but I am glad that I stuck with it, since I would have otherwise been forcibly told that I couldn't continue on to Steady Fundamental until I got like a bunch of story-locked requirements. Thanks, Tsuchikoshi. This struck me as interesting, though. For a while, I had composed most of this video on the assumption that the big, fascinating twist we're playing with in this game retroactively paints the Zero Escape series as ultimately kind, or at least kinder to our 5 protagonists than we realized. When Junpei is cruel, or Sigma votes betray, or you make Diana kill the others, you're playing out offshoot versions of themselves that they will later extract the important parts from in order to solve the final puzzle. Takumi, by the nature of his time travel mechanics, is always consciously going back to day 2 over and over again. I did later find out that this isn't the case. He consciously decided to go back in time once and was pulled back in time a second time in a route we'll discuss later, which does kind of diminish the twisting nature of it all. The idea of him trying to go back and make things better, like consciously trying to Groundhog Day perfect his playthrough of 100 line, but yeah, that wasn't the case. Instead, what we have is something far more in line with Uchikoshi's usual fare, but the trade-off is that instead of having the whole game as his bad ending offshoots of the singular golden route, Takumi travels through a sample platter of genre fiction, his choices morphing the world in myriad fascinating ways. I will now attempt to talk about these myriad fascinating ways. Before I do that, though, I am going to do some clerical stuff. I do not plan to spend a lot of time talking about the romance, comedy, killing game, the various offshoot routes from the second scenario, the coming of age, the cult of Takumi, or the boxes routes. In a lot of cases, I just don't have much to talk about with them. I found the romance and comedy routes minorly interesting here and there, but not enough to really dig my teeth into. I found the conspiracy route hilariously empty, seemingly a running gag of a bad end, and while I may find the Eito routes interesting, the Ava one sufficiently freaky, the reset ending full of a bittersweet melancholy, outside of generally liking them, there's just kind of not a lot to say. I will, however, briefly discuss that it is really funny that the Cult of Takumi route was just compiling all of these images, like the images of all time, so that I could like one day send them to friend and Danganronpa sufferer Professor Bopper. That despite it being a nightmare conceptually, just everyone at their worst, it does have Takumi and Eito together entirely naked. It's a genuinely interesting bit of horror, but not for the toxic yaoi. That part goes hard. I also genuinely liked the coming of age story. It felt a little rigid, which makes sense, but it was a pleasant story that got to be sufficiently clever in its execution. It's a pretty true to form story with some good twists and turns. You get to fight Eito a 3rd time. That song even plays again. I don't know. I didn't feel like I wasted my time with it. I will say that I feel like the Box of Blessings and Calamity Roots did absolutely waste my time. Not that the stories were that bad or anything, they were fine, but they had these almost identical plot beats, but separate timelines, and it just felt like I was repeating everything that happened like 4 times in a row, and all in service for a plot line that was mostly just, we travel around finding boxes and occasionally something weird happens. Like, Shoma had a fine moment, I guess. Good for him. I'm sorry, Gozu. I failed. I wasn't able to care that much about Shoma ultimately. After 100 endings, his thing just kind of wore on me. That wasn't good. What did I find compelling? Well, in a big way, I mostly found myself playing each route more curious as to how it all comes together at the end. I was, for a lot of my playtime, stuck in my expectations of what Uchikoshi does with his games, and was trying to see if there would be like one big, profound, super golden route to pick apart, so whenever things went horrifically wrong in like the slasher or the killing game or mystery routes, I would simply shrug and tell myself that this is all kind of part of the plan. Watching Takumi Sumino lose his mind, or get killed, or get imprisoned, or zombified, or even when he gets possessed or whatever, I always took it as part of the process. There are 99 bad endings, and each path must have some meaning to be taken from it. The things we learn about the world, the circumstances, the underlying mysteries, so whatever torture, whoever dies, whatever happens, Takumi has to endure it to understand how to break free. The 2 most significant paths for me early on, once I was through the romance and comedy routes, ended up being the casual and the Veshness routes. By this point, I had gotten through some of the bad endings in Killing Game, Slasher, and Mystery, started a bit of the Box of Calamity, and figured that I was sort of spinning my wheels here. Eventually, though, I found these 2. The Veshness one was initially compelling and horrific, a path where, upon Tsubasa's failure to sacrifice herself, notably the only time she ever comprehensively fails in the game, the school falls to the invaders, Sire is dead, everyone is imprisoned, and Takumi is kept as an amusing distraction for the supreme leader Veshness. I know several friends for whom this path would break them. It's a compelling total lost state, where you're kind of condemned to staying here, occupied, while Veshness grows increasingly fond of your defiance, your determination to find some way out of this. Contrary to a lot of paths, this one has only one decision. By the end, Veshness grows fond of you, obsessive over the idea that she could break your spirit and reveal the kind of brutal war philosophy she was raised on. Her reasoning being that, as everyone in the academy were like seemingly civilians made to fight against their will, they lack the kind of perspective needed to sharpen their resolve. She wanted to force Takumi to sharpen that resolve. Eventually, a mutiny breaks out, and in the chaos you're given a choice at last. Try and kill her when her back is turned, or try to reason with her regardless. If you choose to kill her, you fail. She forces you to absorb the blood of your friends and fight her to the death. She wins and feels empty in the final moments. Or you can try and reason with her. In this, she injures you so you can no longer walk, and Tsubasa, in a moment built around her desperate agony of being used by the enemy as the liaison between them and the imprisoned students, resentful of your decision to make her the sacrificial lamb, takes the shot to kill both you and Veshness. She succeeds. But Veshness escapes, dragging you to a place she used to go to as a child, confessing that your unshakable perspective drew feelings from her she didn't want to admit to, and you die in each other's hands. This is kind of a profound high point for both her and Tsubasa's writing in the game. A small, interesting story, something kind of bracing and terrifying, but pulling these characters in very starkly unique directions. See, here's the thing about Tsubasa. Outside of the fact that she's in my top 5 characters in the game has some quirks that make her portrayal often weird. See, 100 Line isn't just a Kodaka and Uchikoshi joint venture. The 100 Line's multiple fractioning paths are written either separately or in combination by many other writers, which essentially means there's about as many versions of these characters as there are credited scenario writers. Veshness's route was co-written by Kodaka and Akira Ogido, the latter of which is Something of a hard one to really do research on, a relatively unknown writer internationally at any rate. This route makes sense for him, since he also wrote Goodbye Eto, an offshoot from the second scenario that similarly comes to terms with the interiority of a primary antagonist. And weirdly enough, it also kind of makes sense that he wrote the hilarious and kind of bad conspiracy route. Wrapping back around to Tsubasa in this, by and large, her portrayal in the game's myriad paths is usually pretty consistently positive. She's been generally the sweet, supportive, grounded character in the game. Here she is, giving the fire baby a silly name that he loves. The interesting thing here is that this is the singular root of Tsubasa at her lowest. She resists fighting in the very beginning root of the game for a bit, but from that point on, she's basically here to solve most problems in the game. She makes a device to read life signs in the mystery route. She makes bombs to kill round 2 Veshnas. She fixes the escape pod. She fixes the bus. She makes a baby jar. Like, she just kind of is here to solve problems and in 2 scenarios be your cool Mechanica girlfriend. Wow. But here, she couldn't throw her life away setting off the bomb. She gives up, and everyone loses. So to be here, seeing Takumi, who gave the order to have her kill herself to kill Veshnas, now trying to reason with her and make peace, this is when she finally gets the impulse to kill her, and she uses Takumi to do it. It's horrific and potent, and in a nutshell reveals some major interesting threads to pull at in this game. And, you know, this of course cuts both ways. Like, even in the arguably worse ending, losing against Veshnas leaves her feeling empty anyway. This route delights in the personal agony that ultimately there is something to her that longs for whatever it is you have. Your defiance, your hope, your naivete. It is something that she was never able to have for herself. She was raised to be a warrior, and now killing the only thing that stirred doubts in her head, or dying together with the only person to make her feel like she could maybe possibly be a different person, adds a lot of depth to a villain that most other paths just use up as a perfunctory day 99 ultimate or penultimate boss battle. I mentioned that Ogito also penned the Goodbye Eto route, and in between these two, it reveals the complex nature of the route splitting in this game. When a route splits in Zero Escape, it's ultimately to hide puzzle pieces to the final answer here and there. 100 Line, by having so much more to handle, is instead using it to essentially canonize fan-fictional what-if scenarios inside it. What if everyone's favorite girl Blorbo has a dark, personally tormented arc? What if the big villains had felt like they couldn't ever return from the path they've taken? In a similar vein, the casual route depicts Sirei at his most terrifying and menacing, a title that, I don't know, should be in contention with the conspiracy route, but, nope. Casual route happens as a major offshoot to the second scenario, where after faltering on whether or not Hideko should try to kill Nigo, Sirei comes in, tases everyone, and then all at once things start to get weird. Takumi, already under suspicion that he's been brainwashed, is now further sunken into a haze of lies. It's a terrifying scenario in a lot of ways. Kyoshika and Darumi inexplicably come back to life. Takumi seems to be under a full-on delusion through most of it, culminating in several moments where he can almost peek behind the veil and push through the lies. It never fully works. You're stuck in the doldrums scenario. Everything is just better, easier, low stakes. There's nothing really going on except for the nightmares that you can't access. It's haunting, and at the very final end of things, Sirei comes to tell you the truth. That Veshnas is here, and that your team just isn't good enough. You're all going to die here, and he gives you the choice to live an eternity in the final moments of your mind in peace, or to wake up and share your final end with your class. This is the strength of 100 Line on the face of it. The initial splendor of the second campaign, it's just compelling enough on its own right that it feels like you're not really playing an Uchikoshi project. This is just 100 what-if scenarios to luxuriate in. Cult of Takumi can be horny and irresponsible and horny and fucked up and even a little horny, but it's also not supposed to be a load-bearing story on its own. And even it has a fun, sickening, twisted sense of itself. Like I don't know, for as obviously trashy a route it is, turning everyone in the Academy into hopelessly devoted worshippers of you, having Takumi nervously interior monologuing about how this is probably fine, it's for an important cause, that he has to keep everyone who's left alive, all while his reasoning slips further and further away from rational, makes it a compelling little horror vignette. This too goes with the Retsnam path, also kind of a shorter one, focused on Doremi bonding with Takumi after he leaves second to last academy to die, except for Nozomi. He becomes kind of a villain in the eyes of almost everyone left, and Doremi goes on a quest to find some answer to bring the dead back to life. In the middle of what would be an otherwise obviously bad ending in a Zero Escape playthrough, the game enjoys getting to know Doremi through her desire to help you. Like, contrasting it with the killing game route, which I enjoy for its weird segues into Yuri and for its bold desire to canonize Doremi's interest in killing games as elevated and profound. Here, peeling back layers of her defensive, edgy cringelord shit is a delicate process, made all the more tragic as the monster quickly devours her and replicates her body and memories, and Takumi only finds out after realizing that she's stopped being as open with him. I've forgotten something about this game, about this writer. Kazutaka Kodaka was on the writing team for the Retsnam route, after all, and in this moment he kind of writes a compelling departure from his previous work. Like, to recap, I've made the claim that Danganronpa is a game that is very clear about the dignity of memory, characters and situations that leave it as obvious that erased memories of their old selves simply do not have the same weight as who you are now. And in this perspective, the full weight of the Retsnam route comes to fruition. The only way to raise the monster in order to effectively create the tear needed to revive someone who's been killed and drained of their cryptoglobin is to raise the monster inside of someone. In this case, Doremi. In order to do this, it eventually consumes her utterly and recreates her exactly from her absorbed memories. The route ends with an offer. Fuse with the Retsnam, let it absorb everyone and live a copy of your life forever connected to each other. Or refuse and kill it. And then it proceeds to give you profoundly melancholy endings to the story. Either you fuse together, happy, successful in battle, and yet fully aware that the real Takumi has died, that everyone was just eaten by this creature, or stop it, and with its final act, it creates the tear and revives the dead companions from second to last academy, leaving only Doremi and Eito fully consumed by the Retsnam, to remain dead. In a lot of ways, 100 Line works to explore and revisit habits from the predecessor games, ways that stretch far past the mere surface elements of its cast and its premise. In each of these genre what-ifs, it at least attempts to stretch and pull and tug at the roots of what would make this game famous. The iconic series in the past were of their times, and now 100 Line is reflecting on it, examining what memory means to Takumi. Remember that in his mind, he's only ever gone back once, so every Takumi here is trying to make the best call here for his ending. On some level, genuinely believes in the choices he's making, and that colors each choice as a result. Like I have a friend who fucking hates Takumi, and I get it. In this way, all of his worst choices are now kind of canonical things he would do, but I don't know, as a veteran of Echo, I guess this only leaves me caring about him more. He's so far in over his head, left to make sense of this rewound time he wanted to fix, and it fills me with an odd sympathy. Something about the Veshness path that draws it into sharp focus. He's not a leader. He's not a soldier. He wasn't, to his knowledge, raised to do these things. He's a teenage boy in a world that is pulling him perpetually into madness. Where he has fallen so obviously into bizarre, selfish darkness, like with the cult route, or has just up and abandoned his singular focus, like in the Box of Calamity or Killing Game, or most of the romance or comedy routes, the game will collide headlong in an impossible issue. Which ending is more the real one when faced with the Retsnam question? It is in routes like these where the ambition of 100 Line as a game with 100 meaningful endings can be seen. It is an ambition that inevitably fails. I mean, how could it not? Just look at the conspiracy route or the multitudinous contrived bad endings of the killing game route. I'm sorry, Takumi, but maybe it was for the best that your dreams don't come true. But that intent really makes the feeling of Takumi, a boy split into myriad realities of himself, feel genuinely lost. At least, that's the case for most of the Takumis. The slasher route has two major curiosities to its name. First and foremost, it is the only route in the game where Takumi dies and the route full-on continues without him, both with Nozomi taking over as the main character for the final few days in one major decision, and when Takumi gets zombified. The other, more interesting part of it is that in one ending, Takumi helps Kyoshika escape, becoming the last surviving member of the Academy, but instead of being killed, he's dragged off and possessed by a gi, a bizarre parasitic species that crash-landed on the planet that will take over either dead or living bodies depending on their alien genders. Freaky. This struck me as an odd bit of body horror as it happened on, day 100, the last possible moment with the missiles about to launch, so, what on earth could this accomplish now? And then I remember that Takumi can still go back in time. He just hasn't in most timelines. Hideko confirms this in a different slasher ending. I gotta say, by the way, the slasher path is kinda good. It at least feels like shit is constantly happening, and those are some meaty endings. You kiss Hideko the literal only time in the game in one of them. But yes, in this ending, Hideko explains that the Gi sent him back again and had essentially reprogrammed his brain with her data. This was the moment where I learned that, yes, Takumi was the killer the whole time, and that the game, rather than be a sprawling mess of genre fun, has turned fully into a multiple timeline-spanning hunt. This is made all the more clear as it ropes back into the steady fundamental route, where we learn about the timeline-hopping Yashin, that Eito used it at some point to enter the Killing Game timeline, that the possessed Kakoji has also escaped and become the killer in the mystery timeline, while alternate universe Takumi G went back to become the slasher killer. This game about infinite hellish possibilities, a game that seemed to mourn the idea that you can perfect 100 days of torturous war, has now uchikoshi'd big time, and now you're playing alternate reality chess with every antagonist in the game. Yes, including the invader commanders. That's how the serial battle routine works. Routine? One of my favorite moments in this game was starting to piece this together, and I think it is the strongest case you can make in favor of the gimmicky nature of having 100 endings. The progression from realizing that a lot of these are wacky variants on bad endings, into seeing the really tender, heartfelt fanfic endings, into this moment, realizing that you're now playing a game about timelines, makes it all feel all the more exciting. Now everything that's been happening to Takumi feels elevated as you have to deal with an outbreak of a parasite that's trying to break free of this planet before the end, piloting your bodies to do so. That's even one of the endings in the slasher route, where everyone's a zombie and boards the escape pod. It's funny. This all culminates in pointing directly at the study fundamental route as the obvious, story-locked golden route home. Somehow, in order to get out of here, you have to fix everything, figure out every killer, solve the weird mysteries of the other routes, and make it home. And yet, well, okay, there's two stops on the road before we get there. The first is simple enough, and it's this moment here at the end of the mystery route. The final ending of it, the story-locked one, ending 100. You solve the case, you figure out the killer, Kakoji, and at the end of it all, where everything seems like a failed state, all of the dead seemingly come back. Everyone at the very end, finally back and happy, out of nowhere. It's one of the final endings that seems genuinely good, if completely inexplicable. There is, of course, an answer. And we know where it is, where this was all heading to. The peak of the Uchikoshi part of the game. His signature golden route. But before we truly get there, I do want to point out here, because it will come up later, that this is an interesting thing for him to do. Usually, the final happy reunion in his games are the end point. The big, you did it, jumpy moment. It's weird to get the payoff of something before earning it, working as hard as you can to reveal the killer, only to fail to get her anyway, and then just here's everyone anyway. Now, I don't think this is a blunder per se. I'm willing to give Uchikoshi a surprising amount of grace here, because I think his role in the story goes beyond his particular smoke and mirrors show. He is in a full-on science fantasy setting, after all. There is no weird info dumps about actual things. Okay, buoyancy, fine. He makes a big show of knowing how buoyancy works. But beyond that, we're dealing with blood space, hemoanima, cryptoglobin, material omega, DB particle fluid, and alien species. He's kind of hamstrung by the very premise of the game forcing him to adapt. And I would argue that he does adapt way better than I think may be apparent at first blush. Okay, now let's talk about Steady Fundamental. In pushing and chipping away at this route through its story locks, through it forcing you to go through multiple bad endings, you eventually learn that Hideko is herself, just like Takumi. Or at least she's similar to him. His power is stronger in a lot of ways. His decision to turn back the clock and ending zero kind of set everything in motion in the second half, but in the time he's been working through this, Hideko in Steady Fundamental has regained her memories of about 146 other attempts, realizing that every time she or Takumi dies, the loop resets, same if they make it to the end of day 100. At around 10 a.m., they start to get pulled back to the start of day 2. The actual problem they face in 100 Line 2 is fully diegetic game mechanics. Just as you can never select to go back to a time before the start or after day 100, Takumi and Hideko are stuck in the nightmare of endlessly repeating these days. However, this route seems different. It's the route where Takumi makes all the best choices, convinces her to trust him, and then they plan out a way to use their meta-knowledge to try and make a perfect timeline together. Now, it's imperfect. Takumi's not nearly as aware of every path, some of which he just doesn't know and will never remember here. In their efforts to correct every timeline, they do end up reenacting parts of them from the other side, leading to an extremely surreal time chasing Takumi down in the slasher route, or going back to the old man in Retsnam to learn about the cursed cycle. All of it in service of making one consistent, safe timeline. All of this turning into a checklist. We have to make sure to keep the team happy, we have to make sure to capture and brainwash Ava, we have to use the brainwashing tech to fix Ato, even though they tried it in one route and it famously didn't work, but I don't know, that was the coming of age one and Takumi never remembers that one, so oh well. It's a contentious path, I think. There's a lot in it that's very good. If you're a big fan of Hideko like me, then, you know, this path keeps giving. Hideko calls you her servant the entire time through and reveals a lot of depth and personal loneliness and agony. She confides eventually that she has genuine feelings for him, that after over 100 lives she's lived, seeing him fail and try and die over and over again, seeing this Takumi here, the one that cared enough to give her a gift she likes, that something that small had that kind of effect on her is kind of beautiful. That being said, it is a lukewarm, lightweight jog of a route through, like, the bulk of it. A lot of it is just kind of preempting problems, doing fights that you know by now and have done so many times, and just waiting for the next timeline jump to see the next piece of the puzzle come together. It is here that Takumi, jumping into a failed timeline where the missing half of the squad exists, gets the idea to save them all from their doomed fate by taking them to the timeline where the missiles won't launch. They get to reunite, be happy, but in doing so, Takumi, this Takumi, dies, leaving just the surviving one from the mystery route, and the Hideko from the failed SF route, who reveals that she quietly slips away after that happy photo is shown, to disappear forever. And all of that is just yet another failed state. It becomes kind of bizarre, a surreal trick being played where the most compelling and interesting moments, Takumi sacrificing himself to kill Kakoji, reuniting everyone in this final act, dying in Hideko's arms, all of this is both kind of emotionally resonant stuff and also just straightforwardly a fail state. Even something as small as calling a coin toss wrong offshoots another dead Takumi, a thing that is now burrowed into your thoughts because you have a singular mission in this route. This must be the route where all 17 of you live. Outside of it seemingly being the solution to the time loop problem, it is also the one reality that has the greatest odds, that fixes everything, that can reach the very final end intact. And if you really go along with it, it becomes consuming. It becomes a necessity to ensure that everything is played safe. It becomes boring. And maybe this is just a consequence of playing it last, but it's not even close to my favorite route. The second scenario is not a bloodless route. It opens with the death of Takumi, then Kyoshika, leading up to the extremely mid-boxes route. Saving Ava gets you to the casual split, but if you try and break Nico, it messes with Ava's brainwashing, so now you have to go and fix it. You play nightmare brainwashing roulette with an enemy commander, a character that you know has a real depth and weight to her, but in most cases remains ultimately a person kidnapped and reforged into a tool for survival.
Yes! That's what I wanted. I do like, if I didn't get decadent, can I just keep throwing the switch?
This is, by all signposts from what I've done so far, definitely not the golden path. Everything is going wrong, and then out of nowhere, Shoma starts begging to let us kill Ava and drain her blood so he can remember something, maybe even something important, and when you do, you learn that everything is fake. Your memories, Kadoa, everyone's backstory, they were all fabricated memories for bodies made in a lab to use hemoanima in the first place. Kadoa has never existed, just in the few times Takumi was somewhat lucid during his creation, he saw Nozomi, the only real human on the squad, and his developing mind retrofitted her into his fabricated memories. Big, wild twists left and right, including Eito being let back onto the team. Not out of manipulation, not out of fixing his brain with the Yashin, but upon hearing that he was just like everyone else, a created genetic clone of the Fire Baby, and that his contempt for humanity was nothing more than a developmental error. He plucks his own eyes out, like fucking Oedipus, but, you know, without fucking Yocasta. The desire to try and force himself to make peace with the squad, to remove his ability to see you all, to try and work together with you all instead, motivates him to genuinely reconnect with everyone, to try and see the truth of things. And at the end, Veshness revealing her final gambit, destroying the satellite, obliterating all of humanity except for Nozomi, leaves the squad with one final decision. If the plan continues as is, the planet will be scorched clean and then no one will be left. But instead, stopping the missiles, saving the people of Futurum, leads Sire's programming to overwrite him, removing them from the Revivomatic, and in that state, they all commit themselves to killing the Fire Baby, named in this path, by the way, by Sire as Shion. This also leads to the hardest final boss fight in the game, where now left without items, without reviving, your team will be obliterated one by one, their hemoanima given over to Takumi in order to make him strong enough to crush every missile silo, ending the process in full. But the school detonates instead, with Nozomi sent out to the escape pod as she can no longer fight, her rejection symptoms never fully fixed, only to reveal that all that's happening is the hemoanima in her was simply just leaving entirely. Takumi lands from the explosion nearby, and with his dying breath, he begs her to make peace with the Futurans, to find some way to make peace. And that's the second scenario. Kodaka, after writing an entire-ass game premise for Uchikoshi to build his giant, ornate playground in, comes out with this kind of stunning story, stripping fully from everything I've ever seen him do. Like, I don't know, maybe there's stuff that he's done that's closer to this, but Kodaka really shines in this route. I was genuinely impressed by the big reveal of Danganronpa V3, figuring that the depth of his interest in these kinds of stories were housed fully in the fight for the self, our memories, our relationships defining us, that his most radical statement in his most popular series was to fully desist from any kind of childish talk of hope and despair in favor of survival, in the importance that, regardless of the circumstances surrounding them, their lives were more meaningful than anything this twisted game would try and propose. So, to be here, to seemingly abandon his big ideas on memory and the self in favor of what is right to do, is huge for him. We've learned that basically no one here is real, that there is nothing for them with the humans outside of them generally hoping that you commit genocide so they can take the planet for themselves. There's no reason why you shouldn't abandon them and fight for the Futurans and go down the rebellion route and have a moderately good time. But to reach this end, this big poetic obliteration of everyone, leaving the only human in existence left to try and make peace with the world she's now stuck on, I don't know. It made me cry. I really never thought that Kodaka would be able to do it. But I will say that the initial thrust of this video, to simply brag that Kodaka wrote something so good that it eclipsed the Golden Root, Uchikoshi's big grand finale flourish, but I am instead going to pull an even weirder card and say that Steady Fundamental is also kind of some of Uchikoshi's best writing. Let me set things straight. On sheer basic terms, Steady Fundamental is kind of underwhelming. It is the route where you're running around essentially the end of a time loop story, perfectly playing through the entire game, making all the right choices, so much so that the very final end of it, feeling like an inevitable, tragic unraveling of all things, only to surprise give us a freebie ending, doesn't even feel exceptional. It feels sloppy, a dull moment undercutting an otherwise remarkably tender scene between Takumi and Hideko, and I'm not really here to say it's all hinged on their relationship or anything, like, just throwing it out there. I'm not really invested in shipping discourse between Takumi and his multitudinous suitors, but I will call this route some of his best work because it is made to be unassuming. This sounds like a cop-out. Please hear me out. Throughout his career, Uchikoshi has a lot of wacky routes to play with, a lot of weird ones where he's allowed to be strange and horny and nonsensical and all of that. But it is this route where he writes a story where everything must go right. In an inversion of Zero Escape, which is built to be a series of frustrating fail states until it all clicks together, little moments of pathos shared between characters, Sigma and Luna, Sigma and Diana, Junpei and Carlos, Mira and Eric's heart, they all fall to the wayside as you put the puzzle together. I see Steady Fundamental as Uchikoshi seeding the idea that this game is like his others, that he can simply just wrap up the whole of the puzzle, and I know so because there is a deliberate issue with ending 55, the golden ending. See, the whole premise is that all 17 lives embedded in the Last Defense Academy need to come out on day 100 alive in order to break the time loop. That is the only priority of Hideko at this point. She needs to ensure it because, again, she's been stuck in here for like 40 years worth of time so far. An amount of time that Takumi by the end of it will at least get somewhat close to. That singular focus, the repeated insistence that failing this, everything will fade out by day 100 and reset, ends with everyone on the escape pod, Deus Ex Subasa'd to accept Side, Nigo, Shion, and Ava. Eido's brain is genuinely fixed. The minor arguments between the Nabokov twins, Ima and Kako, settled without incident. No one got infected by the Gi, no big plan to explode the satellite. They didn't even fire the missiles, so the planet gets to be safe. Ava's still brainwashed, and that's just gonna happen, I guess. What a nightmare. The idea that the satellite would just land and wage war anyway is conveniently ignored, and we're given fuck. The idea that the satellite would just land and wage war anyway is, like, conveniently ignored, and we're given this lovely little "thanks for playing my game" ending CG. Look at that. Everyone's so happy. And then the credits roll. and you're sent back to the chapter select screen. Now, sure, there's a million answers for this. I'm not here to game theory this and try and deep lore prove that it didn't work or anything, but Uchikoshi chose to end it there. If ever there were a game that delighted in taking extremely arbitrary swings, making, for an example, an entire Choose Your Destiny screen for the one time Nozomi has to make it, remodeling the battle start sequence in quadruplicate to center around Takumi, Nozomi, Eito, and Gaku as the main character of it, having a day 101 would be easy, no? Like some concrete mechanical proof that they broke the cycle, that this was the choice you were supposed to make. That during the promotions they were saying that if you find an ending you like, don't feel like you have to do them all, was ultimately not a trap to reverse psychology us into playing until we got to ending 55. It was a trap to get us to ending 1. See, this is why I believe in my conspiratorial nonsense, that Uchikoshi wrote this path this way on purpose, because here, in the deepest parts of this game, the final moments I experienced, this bizarre dance Kodaka and Uchikoshi have been doing reaches its climax. Initially, they complemented each other. More time and space to develop characters, more chaotic filth that's a much-needed boon to Uchikoshi's high-flying ideas. The cast of a Danganronpa does a Fire Emblem-style Zero Escape is huge, wacky fun. But here, you can see the actual friction they gave each other. Kodaka may have had to care about his cast as characters that are all victims, killers, and survivors interchangeably, but Uchikoshi had to let himself play second fiddle here. See, the end of Zero Time Dilemma still kind of bugs me. As much as I love the cast in it, it's probably my favorite cast of the trilogy. The ending feels kind of tired. There's something to it that feels a little Charlie Brown with the football. No, you see, this time, there's like no way we're all getting out of this one alive. Promise. Even the obvious shutdown box was a self-destruct sequence, but then just... it's fine. They skip to the other side of the coin toss and make it out, and the final villain smugly goes, losing is part of my plan, actually. It feels like he was compelled to end it all the same way. So, looking at ending 55, I see it create an extremely pleasant illusion. No big climactic final boss, no big dramatic twist, just a happy scene that's filled with worrying afterthoughts. The gi are still there. The war will still happen. The loop may as well just repeat anyway. And even then, they get back there and then realize all of the stuff they had to find out the hard way. That there is no Kadoa. Uchikoshi contends in this final ending of his that the Golden Route kind of can't be a truly satisfying one. That the circumstances of the world around it supersede the importance of these 17 lives. Does ending 55 break the cycle or not is almost a meaningless question, because it can't truly end this story. The story ultimately, stubbornly insists that it has no true ending, just 100 recursive ones. And it is under that light that Kodaka's second scenario truly shines like a beacon. The most devastating reveal there completely upends all the clever twists and turns in the other routes, and the final decision, the need to end this academy and give this timeline a chance of being more than a total apocalypse of all life, the decision that outside of all other times Takumi sided with the Futurans, fell in love with Ava, with Veshness, fought with the rebellion, ended the missile sequence, died and failed, this one was earned. This one matters. Because when faced with the real, personal truth of who they are, the students of Last Defense Academy decided that someone should live, and it shouldn't be them. I've wondered why I spent these past few months talking about these 7 games in darkness year. The more you dig at them, they don't truly feel dark in the way that some of the other things I've discussed have. And that's not just because I'm veering wholly off course as this year bears further and further down on me. The stories here aren't particularly grim, usually more high-flying, edgy, full of joyously freaky perverts and bizarre twists and pseudoscience conspiracies and comically overblown stakes. The end of the world, the collapse of a species, a global extermination, people offering their bodies up to be snuff film puppets. It's darkness that's revelatory and into itself, here to make itself a big, over-the-top, mostly kind of embarrassing to polite society spectacle of itself. Look at these kids get fucking killed. Look at Diana explode the station. Look at Ava strip naked, at Eito having sex on Takumi's paralyzed body. But 100 Line puts it all together. It is about these huge, heavy things. It exists in a time where we are constantly aware that atrocities, human evil abounds, that so many of us are trapped in no-win situations, unable to do more than quietly watch as things just get worse. And it doesn't provide closure. It refuses to. Ending 1 feels earned. Yes, Takumi Sumino must ultimately die. There's too much on his shoulders by the end to justify that he somehow gets out of this okay. But that isn't a moral judgment. This ending happened after the game let you keep fighting for humanity over future ends anyway. It accepted that even if your memories of it are false, they are the only things you know, that you fought steeped in blood that didn't deserve to be shed. And yet, the game also just ends. Just like with Ending 55, the game isn't here to make a big political swing about current events. It isn't here to explain genocide or end racism or explain what the responsibilities of the complicit are. It is a game that is just aware that this is kind of what it feels like these days. If my friend and professional Toko Fukawa-gun Professor Bopper can say that Danganronpa is a reflection of being young and caught in the stupid and greedy and anxiety-ridden times, 100 Line is a maturation of that cynicism, as the world has arguably only gotten angrier and meaner and more violent and stupid. 100 Line released almost 3 years after the assassination of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe with a homemade firearm, a doohickey, and now, years after that, the US president speaks fondly of his deep friendship with him. At time of writing this, literally hours ago, Trump was making a speech about how he was better at getting shot at than the late Charlie Kirk. We live in politically worse times, and in that, 100 Line finds itself begrudgingly accepting the background noise of it all. The development of this game was witness to an extremely public war and an extremely public genocide, and accepts that the premise is both comically absurd and comically evil. To put "Are we the baddies" meme anywhere in this video would almost be gauche. The real delightful twist is that we're kind of led to just accept that, yeah, after all said and done, why wouldn't we be the bad guys? Who could look at this situation and not get immediately that there is nothing but a cavernous misery to be had here? And who wouldn't find themselves gravitating to the alluring fiction of a way to get you and yours and escape this nightmare, pull out, return to Kitten, and damn the consequences of the world? And who wouldn't then realize at the very end that maybe this is where it should end instead? Ending 1 is brutal. It's superficially brutal. It's emotionally brutal. You just straight up kill a baby, and that's not even the biggest gut punch in the last 5 minutes. But it's brutal because it gently suggests that maybe the best fate for these miserable kids is to die protecting the people they were made to go to war with. It suggests this without aggression, without a moral imperative, but in a way that proposes that hope for a better future may have to be carried on without those of us who are made to be soldiers, made to fight and kill, and to not even really truly know why. It is a game that carries with it a surprisingly reasoned idea of a better future, and that it's surrounded by so much gratuitous tragedy, horny nonsense, genre trash, and Uchikoshi giving us his least satisfying true ending to sell it. It's taken me a bit to think about Claire de Lune. This isn't the first time Kodaka's used it in a game of his, but its presence is everywhere. Known by my YouTube allies colloquially as Kitten's theme due to it playing on basically every memory Takumi has about Karuha, but once you cross over into 100 Line 2, it starts to bleed all over everything else. Debussy took inspiration from the poet Paul Verlaine. His poem, also titled Clair de Lune, muses on the nature of the soul, of an all-conquering love, a kind life, the moon both sad and lovely. It is both a reverie of our soul's passions and a recognition that what we can fill ourselves with now, our music, our art, our dances, cannot fill the idea of what could be. A perfected life, a love that could finally ease the longing of the heart. And it is in that longing that the rest of the world resonates, simultaneously sad and lovely, weeping in ecstasy. It is also maybe a song so fully embedded in meme culture, in jokes, as the YouTube essayist standard. It was in Everything Everywhere All at Once. This isn't even the first time I've discussed a game with the song in it. It's the third time this year. But I wanted to talk about the song because it is everywhere, representing at first a singular longing in this game. Takumi needing to return to his old life, to his mother and Karuha, to the simpler times, and as his journey undoes everything about him, his own reality, the song returns again, sentimental about the memory of everyone else. Kodaka isn't using the song mimetically, but is using it consciously, directly engaging with an emotional interpretation of the work. The song echoes the realization that Takumi is gently having the meaning that's identified him, distinguished him as a real person in his eyes, fully eradicated out. There is no one to go home to, no home to go to, and all that's left are the people he does have, the people he can see and talk to and love, and he watches them die again and again and again. By the end of Steady Fundamental, it comes in as he and Hiroko stay in the self-destruct room of the school, ready to accept that this may truly be all there is to their lives. A violent, endless cycle of killing innocent people twisted into monsters to keep the only other people they will ever get to know for eternity alive another day, another cycle. The acceptance that maybe their dream is a futile, childish one, but it is one that is both crushing and illuminating. A darkness that makes the two of them here and now shine. And I don't know. I've always been at least a little childish a person. My desk is littered with a cacophony of action figures that I use to play out scenes from the video games I play. I go to sleep with at least one stuffed animal per night. I have literal chocolate milk in my literal fridge, literally right as I'm typing this, and likely when I record the VO for this. And one of my biggest childhood yearnings has always been kind of big and clumsy and naive and simple. I have, as long as I've remembered, simply wanted everyone I care about to live close by, to make it so that every goodbye never has to be a parting, never has to be followed with months of absence, that time doesn't really hold weight. Everyone I love, as I left them, on hand or in walking distance. It's the kind of longing that any child, especially a child who's only known life with divorced parents living hundreds of miles apart from each other, would probably want, but it has colored my appreciation for these kinds of games with a yearning that I know is fundamentally immature. Every ending to a story, a small melancholy, because Frodo has to leave forever. The cast of any given Fire Emblem have to go their own ways and die young, or marry a man if they made the critical mistake of being a woman. 100 Line has helped me, in some small way, to face this immaturity directly. I don't like talking about these more vulnerable parts of myself, because I really can only see so much of this part of me as deficient, for lack of a better term. Me at my worst, too stuck on things I know are unreasonable that I know I need to grow past. And it's kind of embarrassing that I haven't yet. 100 Line is a game where these 17 people are doomed to be here, in this school, fighting the same 100 days, seemingly forever, and the best, most heartfelt ending is the one where almost everyone dies. It is begging you to carry on the wishes of the damned, not because it's moral or just or because you love Karuha, but simply because they can't. Takumi Sumino must die. He must die and die and die and come back and die some more, but you can live. You can remember him and his story. And that can be meaningful in a world that revels in the consumption of meaning. I don't think this game will fix my childish desires. Hell, I doubt that anything will truly cure me of them. But I can take the very genuine tears Kodaka wrung from my body with me. And I think that makes all the difference. Thank you for watching. Special thanks to Alexi Angelica, Amidel, Athena Stripes, Bees Louise, Blair Renix, Blueberries in My Coffee, Kapopo, Colleen T, Evan Kearns, Foxy Hex, Gail Simmons, Granixu, Grizz, La Chouette, Lewis Wells, Low Res, Maria Aladren, Michael McNay, Nariah the Redmarked, Noun Verbally, Philip Pryor, Professor Bopper, Rob Leon, Saint Rawberry, Some Kind of Dog, Sunny Haven, Thomas Vulpez, Tradegood, Trinant, TV's Ross, and Zetetic. Thank you all so much.